Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Straight Out of BPS podcast with Rudy and Jamari. I am Rudy Looters, and as usual, on this journey with me is the one and only
Jamari Jones, everybody. How you doing, Rudy?
doing well. I don't feel like spring is here anymore. I know we're not officially in summer, but summer is here.
Yeah,
And we were inside all summer 2020.
yeah,
All outside all summer 2021.
yeah.
So school is coming to an end. It's exciting. Yeah, so it's a good mood. Still gonna be working with the student to make sure they transition come September, they transition to whatever plan they decide, and also making sure they have a summer plan. At the same time, we here and just focusing on our mental health, doing what we can. And yeah, so we here. It's been a good week.
Yeah.
We here. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Definitely it feels like we skipped spring and went straight to summer. Uh,
Yeah.
I was actually talking to someone about that last week. And it's been an interesting week with just students fully back, and everybody's mood has kind of changed a little bit because
Yeah.
summer, spring is happier, and it's been a tough year, but we have legit maybe a month, 6 weeks left, and it's for me, it's kind of like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Um, Making sure my ninth graders have everything they need for the summer, and summer jobs and everything
Yeah.
like that. So it's definitely just plugging it through. And so just before we get started with our views from the latest news. Again, thank you to all our listeners.
Yeah.
We appreciate you so much. We're excited about today's show. And just like, yeah, we got a big surprise for you guys. And also, if follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Please subscribe to us, share with a friend. It helps us out so much. And we are doing a lot of awesome things, and we are going to be doing some big things moving forward. So just thank you. Share our podcast. We appreciate you guys so much.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
And so getting into our views on the latest news.
What's our views? What's the latest news?
Latest news, right? So we have a lot going on. The first thing, students are back fully. Middle school, high school, we are back. This week was the first week of them being fully back.
No more what is called, what do you call it? Hybrid Wednesday or like
Yeah. Yeah, no more working from home on Wednesdays.
yeah.
I am super serious about BPS implementing working from home on Wednesdays. That would be awesome. We can definitely get creative and use that Wednesday for something else. But yeah, last week was my last week working from home, so we're back in action.
How was the first week back in action? How's the atmosphere, the environment?
So it's so interesting. Not interesting. Students do way better in person, man. A lot of my students that were struggling, when they came back, it was kind of like, oh snap, like you're good, like you're okay, like you're gonna be fine. But I still see some learning gaps because sometimes when we have seen students working from home, they don't necessarily get all that they need as support.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a pandemic, man, and we're just in a very unique
Going on. The city's opening, but
yeah,
going on.
yeah. And so I'm just looking forward to having conversations on how we fill in the gaps, the learning gaps for our students, and what we need to do. And I hope the city addresses it, or BPS addresses this issue. I know there has been some talks, but I hope they don't leave it to individual schools to try to figure out, because we're going to really need to come together as a community and put our heads together and support these students, because the schools can't do it all by themselves. We need the support. We need the help.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm still working from home through the summer. All summer program will be virtual, but we're still trying to find ways to be creative and have some in-person gathering, probably take a trip with COVID restriction in place this summer, go outside, go in the park, trying to find creative way. Yeah.
Yeah. The next conversation, man.
Go ahead. I'm ready for that.
The motorcycle problems.
Getting the bike. That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, the dirt bikes.
You're about to dirt riding on the cities.
Yeah. So we all know that ever since like the past 3 summers, springtime rolls around, the dirt bikes come out, and we had a period of time, I think 3 or 4 years ago, when there was a problem with dirt bikes. And I can be honest and say that there were some safety issues with like dirt bikes being a problem, as far as like, gang violence, this, that, and the third. But that's with everything though. That's with everything. So I think that can be left out of the conversation for a little bit. Because I feel like there has been a crackdown ever since like 3 or 4 years ago. But now, right, since there's been a crackdown, people are complaining about the dirt bikes, scooters, and everything being a problem in Franklin Park. And that they're making loud noise, playing loud music.
I think I read this articles that say, "Hey, I love animal, but I laugh when it said even the animals are suffering from the loud noise."
Right.
The thing, I mean, it may be, but my thing is the like the categorizing and the appropriate reaction, and like the kids is most of the time it's a bunch of kids trying to have fun.
Yeah.
Everybody's excited to be out. We still in the pandemic, but we were out inside. So last year there was we were in a, what do you call that, emergency safety emergency protocol. I forgot how you call that.
Yeah.
And nobody was outside riding. The shit was empty.
Yeah.
People are excited to be out.
Yeah.
My thing here, we had a problem with people with skateboard in the park.
That is true.
But hey, guess what? Who rides skateboards? Which demographic rides skateboard? And which demographic ride dirt bike the most?
Yeah.
We know. We know. So you see the appropriate. So what happens is that the same way investment putting investment to create skate park for skateboard, so they don't do it in the park, create a place for dirt bike.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I think they have done so much construction in Franklin Park that they were always doing something in Franklin Park as far as like riding bikes or dirt bikes. And now since they have kind of took that away, like they have pushed to a different side of Franklin Park to ride dirt bikes and ATVs and stuff. And now that's a problem. I feel like, one, we have to ask who's complaining, on which side of Franklin Park that they're riding dirt bikes. Like, who's complaining? And then two, it's like you said, we have to create a space for these kind of activities. And I feel like they're pushing young people out, and like, if they're not hurting anyone, because like if they're not hurting anyone, I'd rather them be riding dirt bikes than to be doing other things out in the streets that is not productive at all.
Well, here's the thing. So there is so like why I say that some of them may do some carelessly things where it's dangerous. Understand that. So
Right.
the reaction is not to criminalize it. The reaction is to have a conversation, understanding, and how can they do it in a safe place.
Yeah.
Because we need to stop. The reaction needs to stop to be criminalizing everything that Black and brown people or people of color do.
Yeah.
That needs to stop with the criminalization. That response needs to stop because we know it's not the same across the board. So I'm all about safely riding bikes and but for me, what angered me the most is the criminalization conversation around it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, why are we still respond? I mean, I'm not surprised, but we talk about trying to be more anti-racist, creating action, having this conversation.
Yeah.
But our identity is still embedded into like those no reactional norms, like, oh, we need to criminalize this. That's the only way to make them stop. No, we need to move past them. But yeah. Yeah, so what do we have next?
Next also before we move on, there's going to be a meeting in the article I read, there's going to be a meeting with community members, and someone voiced that they should have the young people, the men and women that ride dirt bikes come to that meeting. So that was something good that I heard, that they're going to have community members as well as the young people that ride dirt bikes. So hopefully they can come to a resolution. Hopefully there's something being written about this where it shines some light on that. But I thought I just would add that for our listeners as well. So next, the mask mandate in Massachusetts opens. I believe it's the 29th.
May 29th. We outside, no mask on. Yo, it's
No
good.
mask.
Let me tell you, I understand people who don't want to take the vaccine. I'm not judging anyone. It's not my place to judge anyone. If you don't take the vaccine, what I urge you to do, one, is make sure you do your research and you are decided not to take the vaccine because you've done your research and this is a term you can with, not because somebody told you to. And two, like you're gonna have to keep taking tests. Like, if you're trying to be outside, you're gonna have to keep taking tests because when we all go outside, you gotta take extra precaution. COVID is not fun. So just take extra precaution. Nobody's gonna judge nobody. Like, whether you took it, whether you didn't take it, whether you're thinking about take it. Like, there's no judge. Like, we open. I do feel like there's mixed communication on like mask, no mask, which business, which not business.
Yeah.
So I am still like outside. When I'm outside on the street, I definitely don't wear a mask, especially in the sun. It's hot. Like, it's more like I'm gonna be, but when I'm in the building, depending if people are around me, I'm gonna be wearing a mask, because I still definitely want to be cautious with that. But the numbers have gone down, but it's all the mixed messages around it, and also the mixed messages, like, with the vaccine, like, so yeah, just do your homework, proceed with cautious, and let's be outside.
I think the one thing that worries me is that we are trusting to believe we're serving under the honor system now. So we have to take people at their word and just saying, like, just remember, be responsible, and like remember that you could have someone else's life in your hands. So just make sure that you're being as truthful and as honest. I know masks are annoying, especially when it's hot out, but let's think about humanity. Let's think about life. For me, I'm still gonna be wearing my mask until things get more better. It's just that's something that personally I want to do. And I have a lot of grandparents. So and my parents. So I just want to be as safe as possible. But to each their own. I understand, just like Rudy said, if you don't want to get the vaccine, I totally get it.
No judgment, yeah.
Yeah, so no judgment, just giving you the news. So the next thing, more schools requesting vaccinations. I know that some schools, like BC, UMass, Boston, and BU have been, yeah, those are places where you can get vaccinated at. And so that's a good thing. I know they are requiring students, if you're going to be on campus,
Yeah.
you must be vaccinated. And there are a lot of opinions about that, but I think they are moving forward with that policy. As far as BPS, BPS, I know some of my students have started getting vaccinated, which is like awesome. And so their younger students, the age of 15, can now start getting vaccinated as well. This makes me very happy because, you know, my students, it makes us all feel safer in the school building. And I think as school is starting back full, not that we want to overcrowd classrooms, but you know, we can start having semi bigger classes in school because of that security as more students start getting vaccinated. So it gives me hope for next year as well.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like things are moving forward for next year to be fully in person at capacity without reservation. Um, while this is the case, I do feel like we need to sit down and figure out what worked well during the pandemic, because something did, and like, you know, how can we implement them? How can we create, like, you use some of the things we learned and still keep them in some capacity, you know, and also um those kids who used to who there were some kids who didn't do well at all and yet perform well this pandemic. Like, you know, how to create an environment for them that now that we understand the environment is for them. So how do we, you know, start, it's all goes back to the equity piece, like, you know. Yeah.
Nah, and I think you're right. And that's a conversation that needs to be had, or we should start having. Definitely.
Yeah.
And that is our views on the latest news.
Yeah. That was the views. So on this episode, on our 10th episode of Straight Outta BPS podcast with Rudy, 10 episode, wow, with Rudy and Jamari.
Crazy.
We have another official, man. It's been a journey of us learning, you know, and especially with such an important election year in Boston. We have a guest. Um, she is the chair of the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee on the council and vice chair of Education Committee. The first Black woman to become president of the council, a BPS graduate, BPS alumni. Without further ado, our next guest on Straight Out BPS podcast with Rudy and Jamari is District 4 City Councilor Andrea Campbell. Welcome to the Straight Out of BPS podcast with Rudy and Jamari, Mayoral Candidate and District 4 City Councilor Andrea Campbell. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Counselor, you have quite the background story, specifically with your parents experiencing incarceration with your male member of your family and going through 5 different schools. Despite all your experiences, and you had so many accomplishments, one of them being the first Black woman to become president on the council. Though your story is pretty unique, there are actually a lot of BPS students who have similar background with you, and as a result, may not see school as a priority and maybe struggle to focus successfully on school. What message would you have for students who may be going through the same experience you went through?
First of all, thank you guys for this, what you're doing. It's amazing. Of course, when we learned about it, it's like straight out of BPS. I love this. So I just want to give you guys props for what you're doing. You know, and I appreciate the kind words at the beginning of the intro, and also the recognition, right, that a lot of our young students and families do have similar stories of losing loved ones to the criminal justice system, or violence, trauma, poverty, homelessness, you name it. I often say that we're not going to eradicate poverty overnight. We're not going to eradicate incidents of violence overnight. We're not going to get rid of trauma overnight. We're not going to suddenly be able to bring families and reunite families overnight. But the powerful thing about education, and particularly Boston Public Schools, is we have an opportunity in the face of all of that to make sure that our young people have everything they would need to still be successful in life. And that is my story in a nutshell, right? The 5 schools I attended within BPS, pre-K to 12th grade, provided me with incredible opportunity, surrounded me with people who believed in me, teachers who believed in me, not all of them, but most of them, right? And so I think that's, for me, the power of education, but most importantly, the power of Boston Public Schools if we get it right.
You say something like, you know, make sure the students are ready for life. This is something that we've been thinking about so much, because our student, when they leave school, it's just like the focus is so much on college, not life. So even those high achieving students, they fail in college because they don't know how to deal with life. So putting the focus on life, we feel like will be a better tools for students to be successful after high school.
That's right. And I often say life, whatever you dream of for yourselves, right? Like, we need our young people, just like we should still be dreaming. What do we want, right? We're so young and fabulous. What do we want in our lives? I have 2 boys. I think about their dreams all the time. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And of course, it changes every day. Every young person should be able to dream for themselves a whole host of things and be able to go after that. So our school should set them up for a career, for their dreams, for any pathway, anything they imagine. And if we are not setting them up, then we need to adjust things to make sure they have everything they would need to be successful. And the best thing about our city is we have everything it takes to do just that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Moving on to the next question. On your campaign website, you stated, the truth is that Boston has always been a city divided by access to opportunity. And which opportunities do you see Boston having a division in access? What do you think is causing the division in access to opportunity? If elected as mayor, what is your plan to start bringing equal access and opportunity to the people in Boston?
I think every system has inequities in terms of access. So I have been talking about inequities, of course, in education. I live in Mattapan with my 2 beautiful boys. I often talk about they have a 5% chance of getting into a high quality BPS school compared to certain downtown neighborhoods. It's 80%, which is just troubling when you think about that number. So that means that we have to obviously have greater investment in all of our schools so they have the resources, educators have the resources to serve our students. But that's a major inequity in housing, inequity in access to parks, green space, neighborhoods, right, that feel safe, with streets that are clean. Everything you can think of has an inequity in it. And I think part of that is just the foundation of this country. You know, racism, division, of course, the same narrative here in the city of Boston. We have a history of racism and division. And when I jumped into this mayor's race, I said, this is our opportunity post George Floyd. If not now, then when, to really talk about those divisions that exist, those inequities in every system, and to do the hard work of closing those gaps. And the best thing about our city is if government takes the lead, and frankly, they must, because government created many of these inequities in the first place, that if we take the lead and really lead with an equity lens, apply that tool to our work, which means really centering communities of color, for example, low-income communities. It means investing in communities that have been under-resourced, under-invested in for a really long time. So that means, of course, Dorchester, Mattapan, East Boston, parts of, Hyde Park, the neighborhoods that need the most. And so for me, it's applying that equity lens in closing all of those gaps.
Definitely. I think it's so important, especially working in BPS. And I know that my students, where they come from, they often see, they don't see things outside of Boston, right? And that's sometimes they don't realize the things that they don't have. And like when we interact with like different schools and things like that, I can see sometimes they get discouraged, like I can't make it because, we don't have these resources, but the other schools do, and like these other suburbs. And I have to make them realize sometimes that even though you don't necessarily have like the equal access or the same resources, you have made it this far with the things you have had. But I also make them realize, like, imagine if you did have this, like you'll be so much greater, right? And that's why this question is so important. And I'm glad that, you're kind of centering around equal access, because that's something that I care about a lot, especially for my students, because I know they will do so much better if they just have the same opportunities as other people.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
One thing that stood out for us in your campaign, you talk a lot about action. And to be honest, we've been having a lot of conversation for a long time, and conversation is good. It provides different perspective, understanding, but now it's time for conversation with a proactive action. So Boston has a strong college-going culture, and it's home to some of the top college in the nation. However, not all students see education as the next move, and sometimes they feel they need to leave Boston for those opportunities. In your vision of Boston, how can Boston be a place where students may not consider college as the next step, but for them, the student who may not consider college as the next step for them, but instead see music and entrepreneurship as the next step?
Right. So college is for some, and go for it, right? And when you think about Boston Public Schools, we should create pathways to college. But again, it goes back to creating pathways to folks' dreams. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you mean to tell me we can, in the city of Boston, create programming, internships, mentorship programs for folks to have access to all of that while they're in our Boston Public Schools? So I firmly believe we can. When you think about artists, we have Berklee College of Music that is generating incredible artists every single day. Yeah. Residents who live right here in Mattapan, in my district, Dorchester, traveling the world with major artists and leading the way, and all of the other cultural institutions. I often say we have Boston Arts Academy. That's great. We need more than one Boston Arts Academy. When you think about the interests our young people have in going into the arts in the creative economy, when you think about the institutions here and the fact we have a robust creative economy, we need to think outside the box. And so for me, it is expanding the pathways, and I always say, like, not pie in the sky pathways, like specific things. You look at it, like you go into college, for example, you look at a course catalog. I want to go into writing music. You should be able to look at a Boston Public Schools catalog and see those options. We should always be expanding those options because there are incredible jobs that are available. And I can't stand when I hear a young person say, there's no jobs out there. I'm like, yes, there are. We have to make sure we give you the skills you need, the mentors you need, the supports you need. And BPS can definitely do that in a more robust way. And we need action, not more reports on all of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like BPS is just, we have all these schools in the hub, right? But we are not moving as one unit. I feel like we are so separate in the way we are helping students, running our schools, and there's such a disconnect, but we're under the same umbrella. And I feel like if we just had more unity in the way we ran our schools, I feel like it would benefit, our students. And then we can say, like, oh, this school might not be a great fit, but you can also transfer to like Madison because you're interested in this. But sometimes working with students, again, like to get a student to transfer somewhere is such a long process, and then you're worried about if someone else is going to follow through, and there's no like unity in the process. So that's just very interesting to hear you talk about that.
Yeah.
And it's something that comes up quite a bit. Just the red tape, bureaucracy, like all your family and a young person has to navigate. You know, we're in the system, and I still find it challenging to navigate. Even when I was signing up my 3-year-old, just learning about all the options that were available. You know, you had to go online. So if you don't have a computer or internet, good luck. So there is a way for the district to align us in a greater way, to make sure that we're making it easier for folks to engage with the district and to get the information they need proactively. And I remember putting out a plan on this 3 years ago, talking about just how we needed to remodel welcome centers, how we needed to improve family engagement, do away with all the bureaucracy. And there are ways to do that. And there's families that are committed to this. And, you know, I talked about it as a counselor, and I'm continuing to stress it as a candidate for chair, because families want to see action. They have the ideas. They now want those implemented.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to the next question. The pandemic shined the light on the lack of transparency in BPS and how faculty, staff, families, and students are not always involved in the decision-making process. How would you change the lack of transparency between BPS, faculty, staff, families, and students? And once you become mayor, in your perspective, why is transparency between these people so important?
It's critical, and not just for Boston Public Schools. I'm in conversations around policing reform and our department being transparent. Because when you talk about those inequities, and usually they are racial inequities in every system, if we are going to close the gaps and improve those systems, folks need to trust and believe that that's true. And one way to do that, to sort of get trust from residents, is to be transparent about what we're doing, to not be in some room closed off, making a decision, and then of course, telling families what we're gonna do. I also firmly believe, in addition to transparency, that those who are living the issues we're talking about also have the solutions and need to be at the table. Families are struggling with in terms of information and access. They have ideas on how to change that. Teachers and educators are struggling with family engagement. They have ideas on how to access that. Or to change that. Some of it is family engagement counselors and coordinators at the school level who are trained in different languages, who have cultural competency to engage with families. Some of it is the district, of course, making it easier for folks within the schools to do that work. Sometimes family engagement may live at the central office. How do we get it at the school level, right? In addition to that, some folks have talked about, and I remember bringing this up at a hearing, post-pandemic, we have a lot of federal monies coming in. People are out of work. Maybe we stipend some folks or do something creative in terms of family engagement. We got a lot of seniors and elders in the community who are like, I want to be helpful. You know, pay them to get involved and to engage with our young people, to engage with families, to engage with parents. There's such wisdom there, right there in the community. So all of that is critically important, and have been stressing that, because if we do not engage families well, and remind the district that they are accountable to our families, that we are accountable to our families and our students, we'll continue to see these inequities actually get worse. They need to be centered in what we do, so that what we do is actually impactful and helps them with respect to what they're dealing with.
Yeah. I'm so glad. So I'm hearing, like, you know, from what you were saying, like definition of engagement, because for a long time, engagement has been a simple call. Hey, your student is not doing well, as long as they communicate that, but going, so as we pass those days, like engagement, seeing family, the value that family brings to every community, and having the school and family be a community, this is the level of engagement we need to strive for.
That's right. And I remember I have a group of schools in the Grove Hall section of my district, including the Burke, And, there's always this assumption that families don't want to engage.
Yeah.
They do. They may be overwhelmed. They have jobs. They just want it to be made easy. And what we found, I was meeting with the schools in my district every Friday for like 2 years, trying to figure out how we create pathways for students, improve quality in the neighborhood. And parents and families wanted to be engaged. The question is, how do we make it easier? How do we get the resources into the schools?
Yeah.
So that they can do it, right? They need more human capital to be able to do this, but it's critically important. But families want to show up, but we have to also do it at different hours.
Yeah.
We're in COVID. Maybe it's on Zoom, in person. Maybe it's all day a family member can be able to show up at a school to engage, not just early in the morning or later in the day. And so right now with Zoom, families obviously engaging all the time with their students. So how do we get creative going forward to make it easier for parents to do that?
Yeah.
Guardians, right, and caregivers.
Before we go to the break, 2 things that I think you touched on that was like, I think is great, is one of them is like stipending parents to be involved. And you said that, parents work long hours, and the reason why they work long hours, we can talk about it for days and days, and hours, but in order for them to kind of be involved, we have to give them an incentive, and they want to be involved. But if they're trying to support their kids at home, maybe if we can stipend some of those hours that they're missing, that can supplement for them being at the school and being involved. I think the notion, like you were saying, that parents don't want to be involved, that they don't care, is false. Right. And it's just, we have to think and be more creative on how we reach out to parents and how we get them engaged. So I think I just want to reiterate that for the people listening, because it's so true, man. And I hate when I hear people say that, people, parents in, the public schools, they don't really care. They're never involved. That's not true. That's false. That is so false.
And it's also, right, the underlying theme there is that parents of color, parents, single parents, caregivers, they don't care. They do care about their kids. I have come across, even when I started my legal career, representing students in education cases, school discipline, special needs cases, a whole range of cases. Families always showed up. Every hearing we had, even when folks were busy, even those folks and those parents that were dealing with a lot. I had parents that were dealing with substance use disorder. They still showed up because there is this underlying in the heart, right? You want the next generation to do better, right? And then there are parents and family members who've dealt with trauma that has never gone addressed, right? Mental health issues, but families showed up and proved wrong this assumption that they don't want to show up. And so our job is to make it easier for them to do that and to meet them where they are. Yeah,
definitely. And we are gonna take a break on that note. We will be right back with our mayoral candidate and District 4 City Councilor Andrea Campbell.
Welcome back. We are here with Mayoral Candidate and District 4 City Councilor Andrea Campbell. Councilor, in your action for Boston children, you stated the following: equity is giving every child what they need to succeed in school and pursue the life of their choosing. In Boston, we must come into the idea that those who have the least deserve the most from the public school. Knowing that gentrification is taking place in Boston, who will benefit from a stronger commitment to equity in our Boston public school? How do you see gentrification impacting our public school?
Well, gentrification, displacement, housing affordability, major issue, right? We have a lot of families struggling, one, to just stay here. Some families, even as we sit on this Zoom, who are being displaced, evicted from their homes. And we know that affects a student, right? How they show up, if they can focus, if they can concentrate on the work they're doing. So when we're looking at improving Boston public schools, which we can do, and make sure that equity actually exists across the entire system, it's not lost on me that we also have to deal with the fact that families can't afford to live here. So we have to be addressing the housing crisis. We have to be addressing the fact that in certain neighborhoods, there are more incidents of violence. We have to address trauma, public safety issues. We can do all that at the same time. It's just recognizing that there's an intersectionality with all of these systems, that our families and our students are showing up, interfacing with all these systems. And so our solutions have to address all of them at the same time, which we can do, and also address the family as well and the circumstances as well. And no family should struggle to live in the city of Boston. There's a way in which to ensure families have the economic stability they need to be able to afford to live in the city.
Yeah.
I feel so strongly about this question as well, because I see all these buildings like going up in Boston, and you know, I just see that more people are being pushed out, and pushed out, and even some of the monuments around Boston and murals around Boston are being taken down and then replaced with, you know, buildings. And that's something growing up like on Columbia Road. And I'm thinking of a specific place on Columbia Road where even I think there's a charter school there now, or they're building. But I remember a Facebook post going up like, no one knew like what's going on, and the mural was like taken down. And I was just like, geez, like it's just so crazy. But I just feel so strongly that, you know, who are these buildings being made for?
That's the question. That's right.
And I'm glad that
that's right.
Who are they building for? And I'm glad that, you know, they're recognizing, I guess, the value in our community, but also like, are you recognizing the value in the people that you're serving, and what are you doing when you put these buildings up?
Oh, I love that. And because on the one hand, you're exactly right. What are we building and for whom? We can, in the city of Boston, with a little intentionality, we can build housing that is at affordable price points for everyone in the city of Boston. We can build housing that's for families, not just studios and one bedrooms. We can create homeownership opportunities, not just rental opportunities. As a district councilor, always was pushing for these things with respect to every development project that came in the community. But that second piece, I think, is critically important on the valuing piece. Really, really lifting up the idea that this city has, what makes it so great is not just the richness of its neighborhoods, right? But is the fact that it is diverse. You know, on the outside looking in, you would never know it. I often tell folks, Boston is not just the departed in Good Will Hunting. There were stories of Black people who grew up here, who lived here, who contributed to this city to make every system equitable, who worked hard to build the city in terms of what it is, who contributed to the economy. Now we have robust immigrant communities, of course, that are doing the same thing and have for generations. How do we tell their stories? How do we value them? And one way, of course, of valuing them is, of course, making sure they can afford to live in the city of Boston, making sure that they have access to everything that I had access to, that anyone else would, fairly and equitably in the city. So that value piece, I think, is critically important. And then what do we want our city to be going forward? You know, I want my two boys to not only go to BPS and be able to afford to live here,
right,
also to be in a city that's diverse, that's connected, not segregated, that's integrated, right? That celebrates every culture that is here, recognizes the value of every human being that is here, right? That is critically important to me.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, like for me, it's just like grow up in Blue House, Mattapan. And I'm Haitian. So I felt like Mattapan and the Haitian community always get the short end of the stick. And, you know, when you look at like neighborhood, like, you know, like every community has their own. Mattapan was supposed to be the hub of Haitian, but you cannot strongly say that as you say for other community. And when I look at, and let's talk about, you said 5% student in who live in Mattapan have a 5% chance of getting into school, is because there is no high school in Mattapan. So, you know, so there is no high school. There's never. I'm from Mattapan, but I went to Hyde Park when it was divided into 3 schools. So I had to go. So, and when I remember the first time I saw the blue bike on Mattapan Square, I'm like, we lost that battle. It's done. Because not that, like, you know, I'm against the blue bike, but we know who bikes the most. We know who they are for. So And this is why when we're doing this work, it's just like we want to create a more informed alumni community, because there's still people from Boston, from BPS, who went through the cycle. And it's time that we talk, because when we think about, oh, we're fighting for school, but hold up, but who's going to benefit once we out of, like, with how?
That's a great point, Rudy.
So we want to fight and benefit
right.
at the same time.
And I appreciate you lifting up that the Haitian identity too in Mattapan, a big, large population in my current district. I was just actually with Marie St. Fleur, former state rep on Haitian Flag Day, who was endorsing in this mayor's race, celebrating the Haitian community. We were at a food pantry where a bishop was just doing incredible work to make sure not just the Haitian community had food, but everyone who needed it had access to food during the pandemic. We went to visit a restaurant right here in Mattapan Square, right, to celebrate the incredible entrepreneurs. And I was like, why is this woman struggling? Why is Cassandra struggling to get resources to expand a business that is thriving? I was in there buying food. Everybody else was coming in. How do we think about investing in her so that she can grow her business outside of just Mattapan, keep it in Mattapan, but grow it to other parts of the city where people would enjoy her food, enjoy her products, celebrate her. And that's where the city and the government has a critical role to play, is to lift up these stories. If we say we value you, invest in these communities, and then have them at the table informing what they want to see. You know, I can't stress that enough. It's often other folks speaking for communities instead of it being the other way around. So we have tremendous work to do, but I'm excited because for me, that inclusivity, it comes naturally. I don't have to, you know, I don't have to remind myself to include everybody, to value everybody. I see the humanity in everyone. And part of it is because the reason I do this work is after losing my twin brother, Andre, right? Who passed away in a state prison when he was so young at 29 years old, because people didn't value his humanity. They didn't see the humanity in him. I did. I knew he was smarter than me, more intelligent. And so for me, it really is making sure that regardless of where you come from, your past, the choices you've made, that we still see the humanity in you and invite you to participate in your government, and that we see it as a partnership. So I can't stress that enough, and I appreciate you lifting that up.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And switching gears a little bit, school to prison pipeline has affected so many people, so many of our students in BPS, more specifically our Black and Brown boys. The American Civil Liberties Union writes that while white students make up 51% of the public school enrollment, only 31% have faced multiple suspensions. Alternatively, while Black students make up just 16% of public school enrollment, a staggering 42% of Black students have faced multiple suspensions. As a mayor, how do you plan on tackling the school to prison pipeline issue, and how do you think BPS can address this issue?
This is a critical issue. And this is one that is personal for me. You know, I just talked about my twin brother, Andre. I still have loved ones as I sit on this Zoom who are incarcerated. Wow. I've been to so many prisons in Massachusetts. I've lost count, visiting relatives, a lot of them, of course, men in the family. Have lost a lot of loved ones to the prison system. My mom died when I was 8 months old, going to visit my father who was incarcerated. She got in a car accident literally en route to visit him. Wow. My father was incarcerated for the first 8 years of my life. So I didn't meet him. So my twin brother and my brothers and I, we bounced around. He gets out of prison, stresses the importance of doing something different, and stress the importance of education all the time. Education, education, education. We're like, Dad, we get it. We heard you the first time, right? Education, education. But then he would suddenly pass away when I was 19 at Princeton. I talked to him in the morning. He died that same evening. Wow. Fast forward, my twin brother would die in the custody of a state prison when he was a pretrial detainee, which meant that he was waiting to go to trial, never made it. He had a disease called scleroderma, had been doing well before he got arrested. As a result of receiving inadequate health care while in that system, would pass away when he was 29. That changed my life forever, because I asked, how did two twins born and raised in Boston have such different life outcomes? I go off to Princeton, to law school, the rest, by every metric, I've been successful. Like, how does that happen? So when I became an elected, I continued, frankly, the work I was already doing, because as an education attorney, I was looking at the cradle to prison pipeline, not even the school to prison pipeline, just looking at the stats that say 1 in 3 boys, Black boys, will end up incarcerated in this country. And how that hadn't really changed. And so for me as a counselor, it really is looking at Boston Public Schools and ensuring, one, that all of our young people have access, right, to the academic curriculum, the enriching environments, great teachers that also reflect them, opportunities, critically important. But then it's also shifting the culture within our institutions that view, frankly, Black boys, girls as well, students of color, with a bias that sometimes educators and others don't even necessarily know they have. Sometimes we don't even know we have. And so that cultural shift shows up in how we teach. Some folks have called it, trauma-informed instruction, social emotional learning, incorporating those pieces in instruction. I also think it involves removing school resource officers from schools who are deputized as police, and the culture that creates in leading to disciplinary infractions that then lead to usually incarceration and perpetuate this pipeline. I also think it involves, in addition to all of that, all of us becoming more informed on restorative justice practices, other ways of responding to discipline and other things, to make sure that we are not perpetuating that school to prison pipeline. So there are a whole host of ideas. For me, it just involves immediate implementation by the district and making sure that educators, school leaders have all the resources, the training, the human capital they need to be able to implement this at their school level. And I'm going to keep operating with a sense of urgency on those issues, because to me, it really is personal.
Well, so when I was learning about your story, the first thing that came to mind when you talk about your twin brother, it was the Outta Westmore, that story.
Yes.
I was like, oh my God, there's some similarity to it. And I also read that your father got into Princeton, but he didn't go, right?
That's right. My father was a BPS kid. He grew up in Boston, born and raised in the city. He grew up in Roxbury and went to a whole host of BPS schools, graduated from Boston Tech in 1951. So my dad was much older when I was born. And instead of going to Princeton, that's when he started getting caught up in the criminal justice system. And part of it was, I didn't always understand the choices he made, but part of it was really looking at how hard it would be for a Black man. And at that time, it was the 50s, that even if you were educated, you still were relegated to menial jobs. You still couldn't live in certain neighborhoods or get in certain jobs because of your skin. And that led him down a path that I think, of course, later he regretted, because it led to pain in those decisions and hurt and harm. And so I don't judge, but I understand more so now. But at the end of the day, always stressing that I and my brothers do better. But I look at the circumstances too around my brothers, who went to schools. When I got in trouble, it was like, young lady, you go in the back of the classroom, take a moment. When my brothers got in trouble, particularly Andre, was go to McKinley School. And I'm not knocking McKinley School, that the supports, but just the removal of you from your school, from your community to somewhere else. What does that tell a young student? And at the time, my brother was in the same boat as me. He was dealing with trauma at home. He just needed a therapist. He needed someone to talk to. What I got in some schools, what he didn't get. And so there is this gender bias in how we treat our students. We really need to look at behaviors that are just behaviors of young students, maybe behaviors of young students going through traumatic events. How do we create settings in which they can share those things? How do we make sure they have supports, trauma supports, mental health supports? And how do we make sure our schools and our school leaders and teachers and educators have what they need to provide those supports?
And one of the things I think about when asking this question and like reflecting on your answer is having more faculty and staff that reflects our student population. That is something I know that me and Rudy feel passionately about. And I think when you have teachers and faculty and staff that don't necessarily live in the community or grew up in the community, there are certain stigmatizations that they have going into the school building, or for our kids. And something that may be perceived as quote unquote dangerous is not necessarily dangerous. It might be slang, it might be this is how I have to survive, or it might be, you know, not feeling comfortable because, you know, people, they're in an uncomfortable like place that they never been in. So
That's right.
I think that there should be within BPS some type of recruiting method. I know that there is some, but I feel like it hasn't been in the front forth as much as possible. And I would like to see more staff and faculty that are Black and brown, or Hispanic, Latino.
It's significant. It's so necessary. We don't need another report to talk about what that does for a young person, but also how the response at different times does differ. And I've been talking to some even leaders of some of the HBCUs on the work they're doing with respect to particularly Black boys and discipline, and how just the behavior, it's just a behavior of a kid, how it turns into a disciplinary action when it shouldn't, or frankly, how even it could be reflected in a young student's grade in a class when it shouldn't. And so this is work and research that I'm diving into to learn even more, to see how, again, Andre and I go in different directions, recognizing there were some things that happened and occurred for him that didn't happen to me.
I just had a flashback. We had a dean of student, because he doesn't like to call dean of discipline, a Black man, Jihad Scudder, and he was like, the system is set up connecting to the school prison part. The language that you use, hearing, discipline, it's like those are language that you hear in court, and there's the same language that are used in school. So when we talk about this conversation, we have to break down those systematic conversation or terms.
That's exactly right. And I saw that in all the hearings,
that
I had to show up at, and had to remind myself it doesn't have to be adversarial. This is that it really is about how are we going to support this student who's going through something. That should be the question. All of us have been young, made mistakes. How do we support our students? See the humanity, of course, in them. And just remember that in those young years, that's the behavior we should expect. It's like my 3-year-old who's now saying no. And I'm like, what? I have to adjust my response, right? That's the behavior he's supposed to be showing at 3. He's growing, he is learning, he's becoming, he's standing in who he is. His personality is developing. So yes, he's gonna say no. And how I can say, okay, well, what are you saying no to, right? Or shown, right? But you still have to have love, patience, compassion. And so I'm learning a lot just as a parent, and really doing some more deep diving, because 2 boys, right? 2 Black boys. I want them to be valued. I want them to also have self-love. I want them to look at themselves in the mirror, and to know they're special. And how important that is, that when they go to our education system, because it's a big part of their development years, that the folks who are interacting with them also see that humanity and see and give them love so they can love themselves. Critically important. So there's a lot more work to do for sure.
Definitely. For our next question, so there's a lot of emphasis and pride behind the exam schools. You went to an exam school, Boston School, and you named that it helped you prepare to go to Princeton, which is an Ivy League. These exam schools have a reputation that if you attend them, you're receiving a quality education that will prepare you for college. In the same place, non-exam school do not have that reputation. And there even seems to be a stigma placed on school like them. Thinking of a place of equity, can the Boston public school system truly be equitable with the existence of the exam school?
So this is something, of course, I reflect on all the time, right? As a product of Boston Latin School, my brother Andre went to, at one point, Madison, and then eventually graduated from the Burke.
Yeah.
And at the time when he was at the Burke, incredible teachers, Dr. Mack, who eventually became the principal, was his teacher. They didn't have their accreditation at the time. They were working hard to get their accreditation, to get the resources they needed. And I, at the time didn't reflect on how different Latin school was. But looking back, all the resources and opportunities that were afforded me at Latin school were absolutely not afforded Andre and so many young people to this day. So I firmly believe there absolutely has to be greater equity in this system. And it's one, figuring out what that looks like. And so there was recently the year change, 1 year change, right, with respect to the admissions policy. And let me tell you, as soon as you start talking about this, it's triggering. It brings up race, racism, division. So I supported the changes for a year, getting rid of the exam and the other analysis to create greater equity, and particularly because young people could not be expected to show up to take a test in the middle of COVID. And I've said, anything we learn from that, if, for example, we see greater equity or greater diversity, frankly, at Latin school, that's a good thing. And we should celebrate that. We should want to learn from that. But before we make any permanent changes, because it triggers such division, we need to take this show on the road to engage families that frankly were not engaged well with even the 1 year changes, to say the reality is these schools, really it's Latin school. I don't even love Latin school and with John D. O'Brien or Latin Academy, have all of the resources and human capitals to be successful. Many of our schools and other high schools, all of them do not. And that is a major concern if we say we want to make sure every student is getting what they need in our high school system. They can't if certain schools like Tech Boston in our district don't have the partnerships, don't have the human capital or resources like a Latin school. So for me, that's the conversation. Get on the road, anything we learn, make it happen. But I think for me, the second piece that is important is the bigger picture. The exam schools get all of the media attention, all of the conversation. There are a whole host of other high schools in the city of Boston where folks are working hard, doing great things that we should be celebrating. We're talking about Tech Boston and what they're doing for our students, not just on the sports side, but also academically. We're talking Green Academy and the awards they're getting and being celebrated for. Who knows? Celebrating all of these incredible programs and then saying, how do we redesign this entire system, all of our high schools, so they are creating those pathways for our young folks into their dreams, whether it's music, arts, becoming a lawyer, going into biotech, green economy, whatever it is. We don't have that. Latin school's a classical education. Worked for me, doesn't work for everybody. So that's what I want the district to be focusing on, is how do we create a pathway through all of our high schools for our young people? And that's the work that needs to happen, that I'm gonna keep pushing.
I definitely.
I'll have to add too. And also universal pre-K, elementary school, middle school. We're graduating students who I know do not have the skill sets they need because they go to a community college, they incur debt, they're taking remedial classes, then they drop out. And they don't finish and they leave with debt because our system did not prepare them. This really starts with also looking at making sure that our students have the foundation, universal pre-K, elementary school, middle school. I was at the Timilty Middle School, excellent education there. Harvard Kent, the Bradley for elementary, excellent education. The Blackstone, where I started pre-K, excellent. All of my 5 schools I attended as a BPS kid were excellent. That should be the case for every student, and we have a long way to go to close those gaps too. So continue to push that in my plans. And that's exactly what I would do if I'm blessed to become the next elected mayor in the city.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of so all the change that we need to make in BPS to make it equitable. But I'm also thinking we say that Boston is the hub of college. How can we hold those colleges accountable to make sure that where can they meet our student? So we doing the work, but we also need what can added support. I know there's nonprofit like Bottom Line, You Aspire was supporting student to the Success Boston program, but at the same time, as a coach, it's hard for me to support a student if don't tell me they need help. As much as I try to reach out, if they don't accept my help, there's nothing I can do. But also, how do we go back to the life thing? How do we teach us that it's okay to ask for help? Like, that's right. You're gonna be all like, it's like, because I remember as a student, I if I didn't have a coach, I would not have made it to college, because I was a high achieving student in high school. I was told I was all set to go to college, but yet I struggled in college. My coach is the reason why I'm here, because I didn't understand the nuance of what's on the other side. I feel like if there's a pipeline, more, if we're in the college town, where can the college meet us too?
I agree. Whether it's the colleges, everyone, business community, intern, every student in our schools should have access to not just great curriculum, great teachers, all the basics, right? Excellent education, but they should have access to jobs, internships, which I got, right? Access to mentors, access to even the ability to get college credits and certifications and engaging with college communities while they're still in BPS. So when they show up on the campus, they're not shocked or surprised. All of this is possible. And the question is, how do we pull in everybody, including unions, to Madison Park for jobs, right? All of this, everyone has to play a role in improving our system. And that's why I do not accept that Boston is not number one in delivering an excellent education for everybody, because we have everything it would take right here in Boston.
Definitely.
That's what makes our city so special. Every student, whether you're an English learner, whether you're a special needs student, whatever it is, you should be successful, and we have everything it would take to give you what you need. And that's the part I'm going to keep pushing, and not accepting excuses anymore as to why our young people aren't getting those things.
Yeah, definitely.
So our last question, we are curious to know if you see any benefits to a fully elected Boston school committee.
I absolutely see a benefit to changing the existing model, because I've heard from numerous parents and families and other stakeholders, the current structure of just 100% appointed by the mayor doesn't work. It's a rubber stamp. So I've engaged folks, and right now I'm in a place where it's changed the structure, and it could be half elected, half appointed. It could involve more council power, whatever it is. Change that structure immediately. It should not be 100% appointment by the mayor. And also give the young person a vote and stipend them. Absolutely support that. It's ridiculous. They show up to do the work and we don't give them the power. And they're literally the young people. We're trying to help them. But the other piece I want to stress is, while we're creating a more accountable school committee, the power of the mayor's office in transforming our Boston public school system is significant. It is one of the #1 reasons I jumped into this mayor's race, because I said I put out a plan 3 years ago on how to move this system forward, how to create greater equity, and it went nowhere. And I said, I'm done as a mom of 2 boys who can't get maybe into a good school, or who can't get a pre-K seat. Just seeing what our young people are not getting, the power of a mayor in this city is significant in transforming the system. I'm going to continue to push that conversation. And if I'm blessed to become the next elected mayor in the city of Boston, I'm also going to make sure that I bring everything to bear to improve this system, so that we are indeed the best in the country with respect to every student, regardless of the demographic or the neighborhood they come from.
Well, that's it for us today. Thank you for joining us, Counselor. Where can people reach you at?
AndreaCampbell.org is the best way. Check out our website. We're also on social media, Andrea for Boston. Check us out. And thank you guys for the work you're doing. Just so appreciate you both. Keep it up. This is amazing.
Thank you for joining us, and good luck in your campaign.
Thank you. Straight out of BPS. I love it.
Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone. Straight out of BPS podcast. We are here with our final thoughts from our interview with Counselor Andrea Campbell. So I can start off, Rudy. The interview was just incredible, man. One of the things that stuck out to me was when we were talking about the transparency between BPS, faculty, staff, families, and students. One of the things I think is very important, especially I think it's struck a chord with me because I'm doing the work and I see the lack of communication, and I'm like living it right now. And I think since going through the pandemic, I mean, we're still in it, right?
Yeah.
You can see that there was a lack of communication everywhere. And I think it played a larger part in because of the pandemic. But what Andrea said was that, we need to be transparent because sometimes the community has the answers to these issues, right? And that if you just say, hey, we're making these decisions, hey, we're thinking about this, or even dare you invite them to add a seat at the table,
Yeah.
maybe we can come collectively and develop a better plan than the original. So I think that's something that really struck a chord with me, and I think that I think about it often. But we definitely, BPS needs to be more transparent in communication when making decisions, reaching out to students and families, and also inviting faculty, staff, the community of BPS to also be informed with these decisions that are being made.
Yeah, it reminded me as you say that, and how she said that too. Like the phrase "nothing about us without us."
Yes.
For us.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing about her, she's in like her mission is driven by her personal experience.
Yes.
Like and that you there's like that authenticity piece, and that she said this is her story, and she's being like her father's story, her brother's story. I was just the things that happen to her family, our student can relate to that. And unfortunately they can relate to that. So it's just the drive to making sure that we have a better system so our student and don't have to go through, and their family don't have to go through that. Like when we started this, we were so we need to have a conversation about changing public school system for the next generation to have better resource and services. And then as we were talking, remember we were talking, it was like, damn, we fighting for that, but who's gonna benefit?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it makes you feel like everything, you can see how everything is connected, because when we first started, we were like, okay, we want to dive into politics. Then as we dive in politics, we find more interconnection, for politics and then gentrification. We find change in the school system. That's why we ask about hey, at the end of the day, who's gonna benefit from those? And her ability to also talk about racial equity that's affecting our family outside of the school and how they're affecting us in the school. Plays a role in that. I like when she said the stipend. I know you like that too, providing the
stipend.
Man. For because to be honest, parents are what does the study say? The average income for Black family is $8. So parents have to have multiple jobs to support their family. And although they want to be involved in the school, they have to work. And we cannot penalize them for a system. The system is already so punitive on them. So it's just meeting people within, that's the true definition, not equality, but equity. And talking about equity, she went to multiple schools and she graduated from Boston Lion. One of the things noticed or is the stigma around exam schools are good, they get the resources, but what about everyone else?
Right.
And I said it before, I'm gonna say it again. Having people with exam school background is not the true representation. And only having only people in from the exam school in the group is not a true representation of BPS, because what about the rest?
Yeah.
You know, and I like how this, like, you know, she went to 5 other school and graduated from that. Like, you know, she understands that and willing to bring, like, you know, with respect, and she understands that with the story of her brother who didn't go to an exam school and the thing that he went through. So, yeah.
No, I think you're right. The one thing I did really like too is the stipend, and then also, you know, the exam schools. Yes, we need correct representation. There's only a handful of exam schools.
Yeah.
And we have so many other Boston public schools that our students go to.
Yeah.
Like, some people don't even know what that looks like from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
So, and they only know about the exam schools, which is, again, like you said, not a correct representation of our students or our district.
Yeah.
It's a small percentage.
Yeah.
But I'm as always, I am happy to be going on this journey with you. Definitely. Educating myself, also others, about what's happening in the Boston community.
Yeah.
And, you know, big shout out to our city councilor, District 4, Andrea Campbell. So
good luck to her. We wish her well on her campaign. As usual, if you know, we are open if anybody else wants to join us. Like, you know, we're excited to learn, to be informed, and to inform our student and others to better understand, create a more engaging alumni community. So yeah, let's have the talk, but talk with action, because, you know, like, we enjoy talking, but, like, you know, even us, as we talking and we learning, we are trying to build that how we can push our talk towards action.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
With that being said, straight out of BPS
podcast.
See you later, everybody.
See y'all later.